Is Vera Johnson, and I am the 33rd District PTA parliamentarian. And with me this morning and helping the process is Marcy Cottrell. Marcy is our Director of Leadership for 33rd District PTA. I'd like to remind everyone that this is a Zoom meeting and it is being recorded, and it will be posted to our district YouTube channel in the near future. Please mute yourself during the presentation so everyone could hear what's going on. Handouts were sent out to all registered participants as of 11:30 a.m. yesterday. If you happen to register after that time, I will be gathering your emails and sending out the handouts to you after the workshop. The handouts that were sent out were the PowerPoint slides, the nominating committee checklist document from the California State PTA, and a fillable version of the nominating committee report. If you have questions, please type them into the chat. Marcy will be monitoring the chat, and we will have all the questions come up and answered at the end of the presentation. It's a relatively short presentation because we're only covering nominating committee information, and it's for both the president and the parliamentarian. If you have a question should be of a general nature and not related to specific unit or council issues or problems. So if you have that type of a question, and if you're in a unit, please contact your council. If you're out of council, or if you're a council and you have a question of a parliamentary nature, you can always email me at parliamentarian@33rdpta.org. The process that your PTA uses to identify and elect officers is very important to the strength and future of the organization. Following the bylaws and procedures assure elections are not challenged, and the entire membership has confidence in and supports the new officers. It is critical that the same procedure and the correct procedure is followed each time. This is one of those situations where an individual's feelings can be hurt, and that can affect their perspective of the PTA. The first thing to do is to consult your bylaws. And the unit bylaws, nominating committee information can be found in Article 5, Section 4. In your council bylaws, it's Article 6, Section 4. There's an additional article in the council bylaws that pertains to your voting delegation, your voting group. The bylaws state the makeup of your nominating committee, who can and cannot serve, when they should be elected, and when the annual election meeting takes place. The president, with the help of the parliamentarian, conducts an election of the unit nominating committee at least 60 days before the annual election meeting. The elected nominating committee meets and creates a slate of candidates, which must be presented at least 28 days before the election meeting. The nominating committee chair presents the final slate at the annual election meeting, and the election is conducted by the president. If for some reason a nominating committee cannot be elected, there will not be a slate, and all nominations will be taken from the floor at the annual election meeting. Reasons for this may be bad timing, lack of nominating committee nominees or people willing to serve, or the lack of a quorum. The president's role. The unit president should consult with the parliamentarian and review the bylaws, Article 5, Section 4, before the election of the nominating committee. The nominating committee election should be listed under new business on the association meeting agenda. The makeup of your nominating committee is specified in your bylaws, Again, Article 5, Section 4. And the committee must be elected at an association meeting. No member may be a member of the nominating committee for 2 consecutive terms or years. Check with the secretary and the last year's minutes for a list of those who served on the prior committee. The president may not be a member of the nominating committee. All committee members must have been unit members for at least 30 days. The parliamentarian may be a member if they did not serve on the committee last term. The principal may be a member if they did not serve on the committee last term. If they did serve on the committee, they may only be an advisor, but cannot be present during the meeting. The election is conducted by the president with nominations taken from the floor. Only those who have been members for at least 30 days may nominate or be nominated. Self-nominations are acceptable. The nominee must be present to accept the nomination or have indicated their acceptance to serve if nominated and elected in writing to the president. Although the president is not a member of the committee, they should follow up to ensure that the timeline is being followed and maintained. The parliamentarian's role. The parliamentarian should meet with the president before the nominating committee election to review Bylaws Article 5, Section 4, and prepare for the association meeting. The parliamentarian should read Bylaws Article 5, Section 4 at the association meeting prior to the nominating committee's election. The parliamentarian should meet with the newly elected nominating committee after the association meeting to schedule the first meeting. They will attend this meeting to assist with the election of the chair and to provide instructions and information on the election process. If they are a member, they would stay for the meeting and participate as a member. If not, the parliamentarian should leave the meeting, but provide the chair with their phone number and be available in case any questions might arise. Let's talk a bit more about the ideal attributes of a nominating committee. Nominating committee members must be knowledgeable about PTA. They should have a broad working knowledge of the various positions and tools available, such as the toolkit and job descriptions. They should be aware of potential nominees, including current officers, longtime members, new members, and student members. The slate should ultimately be a reflection of the entire school community. They should be familiar with qualifications of each officer position. The job descriptions in the toolkit are a valuable resource for this. They should consider the ability to do the job as well as the capacity for leadership and future growth. They must be willing to devote the time required to do a good job. There may be a need to hold multiple meetings or to reconvene should a candidate withdraw. Lastly, they must be able to maintain confidentiality, understanding that anything discussed cannot be shared outside of the committee. The election of the nominating committee. The president conducts the election of the nominating committee and appoints a teller committee of 3, one of whom is the chair. Nominations are taken from the floor and the nominee must be present to accept, or their written acceptance should be received before the meeting. Self-nominations are acceptable. Only those who are members for at least 30 days can nominate or be nominated. Previous committee members and the president, again, are not eligible to serve. The names of all nominees should be posted so that meeting attendees can see them. The recording secretary should verify membership and distribute blank ballots to voting members. Once all ballots are distributed, the president counts the voting members to determine the House. The nominating committee is elected by a plurality vote, which means that voting members should vote for the number of members of the nominating committee as stated in your bylaws. The tellers collect the ballots, and those getting the most votes for the committee positions become the members, with the next in line becoming the alternate or alternates. For example, if your bylaws state 5 committee members and 1 alternate, voting members should vote for 5. Those 5 receiving the highest number of votes become the committee members, and the next or 6th person receiving the highest number of votes becomes the alternate. The secretary should record the results as follows. The following members were nominated and elected to the 2022-2023 nominating committee, and list out the names. In this case, there would be 5, with another name as the alternate. The nominating committee's first meeting. If an elected member cannot make the first meeting, the parliamentarian should contact an alternate to assume the position as a member. This process only takes place for the first meeting. If a member cannot attend a subsequent meeting, an alternate is not called in to serve. So if the nominating committee has to have a second follow-up meeting and only 4 members can attend, the nominating committee then continues with just those 4 members. The committee elects its own chair with the assistance of the parliamentarian. The committee should also appoint a recorder for the meetings. This is not a requirement, but a good practice to ensure that the work completed is tracked. If you don't have a recorder, then that job falls to the chair, who should become the recorder and make sure they take good notes. The nominating committee meets in executive session, which simply means that all discussions are kept confidential. The committee should feel comfortable to engage in frank and open discussions to ensure that the best slate of candidates is ultimately presented to the association. The deliberations. While instructing the nominating committee, the parliamentarian should go over the key points to the deliberation process. The committee should review and be familiar with all position requirements. They should determine all skill sets needed for each position. For example, someone being considered for president should have proven themselves as a good leader in a previous PTA position, and a candidate for treasurer should have good financial skills. The committee should review membership lists to seek out all candidates, as well as make sure that the candidates are members. They should strive to select the best possible candidates for all positions. The committee should provide a balanced slate, which includes members from your entire school community. Contacting candidates. Usually the chair will contact potential candidates, but they may delegate the responsibility to another committee member. When contacting potential candidates, clearly define the job responsibilities. Do not tell them it's easy, trying to persuade them to consider the nomination. If contacting several candidates for the same position, develop a short list of questions to ask each candidate. Honestly share the time and meeting commitment. Officer positions like president and treasurer require a greater time commitment between meetings. Always ask if they are willing to serve, but make no promises. Never persuade a reluctant individual to serve. This rarely works out well for anybody. It's better to leave a position vacant where it may be filled by nominations from the floor during the election or later by the executive board elect. And lastly, get back to all individuals interviewed after the decision is made. The nominating committee report. The report of the nominating committee must be signed by all members. And again, I have provided a fillable PDF version in your handouts. As a courtesy, the report is given to the current president before the association meeting. The chair reads and submits the report or slate at the association meeting at least 28 days prior to the annual association or election meeting. The month and day of the election meeting is specified in your bylaws. You may list positions as vacant if no candidates were found. However, a unit must have at least a president, treasurer, and secretary to be viable. The report may be sent to all members or physically posted at the school site. Do not post it on your website as non-members may have access to it. If a proposed candidate withdraws, the nominating committee must reconvene and fill the opening with a new candidate. The work of the nominating committee is not completed until the actual election. The chair reads the final report or slate with any changes at the annual election, at the annual association election meeting or prior, the chair reads the final report or slate with any changes at the annual association or election meeting prior to the election. The president will also call for any nominations from the floor during the election process. If there are any vacant officers' positions after the election, the executive board elect will fill those vacancies with an election. If a vacancy occurs after the start of the new term, the executive board will fill that vacancy with an election. This information can be found in your bylaws, Article 5, Section 12. Besides the resources listed above on the slide, I have also provided you with a checklist in your handouts. Are there any questions?
I have a few questions that were listed in the chat. Let me let someone in real quick. Okay. It says, we still haven't had anyone step up for parliamentarian. Can the president, VP, still get this done if we don't have one?
Yes, the president can get it done. If they need assistance, and if you're in council, you can contact your council parliamentarian. If you're out of council and you need help, contact your leadership mentor, your district leadership mentor, or myself, the district parliamentarian.
It says, where can I find job descriptions for all positions?
That's in the toolkit, and you can find it online or in the printed toolkit.
Perfect.
And online it's at capta.org.
It says previous committee members not eligible to serve. Does that apply only to the last year's committee, or if they were on the committee 2 or 3 years ago, are they still ineligible?
This only applies to last year's committee, the immediate previous committee.
And the last question I have on chat is, if someone is interested in running for an officer position, should they not be a part of the nominating committee?
They can be a part of the nominating committee unless you have a standing rule that says they cannot. So yes, they can be.
Can the association vote for the slate of candidates all at once, or do they have to vote for each position one at a time?
If there is only one nominee and there are no nominations from the floor, yes, the association can vote for all officers as a group, as the entire slate. But I'm going to be going over this and more at our elections basics workshop, which is going to be on January 19th at 10:30. So there's my advertising, my commercial for that.
One more question. Does the nominating committee, must be elected by the association 60 days or 50 days before the election. I thought it was 60.
It's 60, 60. Yeah, 60.
Any more questions?
I had one more clarification question, and I know you probably will cover this in the elections training, which I'm looking forward to. So if we presented each position one by one, because there were more than one person running, then once the vote takes place for like that first position, whoever didn't win, can they then jump into the next category? Like, for example, if we elected for president, there were two people, A and B, and then B lost, can B then run for vice president and then so on?
Yes, B can, they can self-nominate, because we take nominations from the floor for each position for the next in line, you know, for the vice president or executive vice president, however the unit is organized. Yes, they can do that.
Any more questions or clarifications or need for
And we're going to go
information?
over all of this election information on January 19th, and I will be providing a script, and we'll be going over that in detail. So I encourage our presidents and our parliamentarians to attend the election workshop.
It says the nominating committee slates one candidate, correct?
Yes, they should slate one candidate. In very unusual circumstances, you could put up two. That would be very unusual. It is acceptable, but the ideal is to put up one candidate. If there's someone else who feels that they are qualified and they weren't put on the slate, they can always be nominated from the floor during the election or self-nominate.
So if you're a parliamentarian, when we do the election workshop, please have your presidents come, because it's very helpful to have the script. I was a unit president and a council president as well. It helps to have that script right there in front of you. So if anything wonky happens, you've got the exact wording right there in front of you.
Yeah. And I'd like to add that it's really important to follow proper procedures, because if you don't, if your timing isn't right, if your nominating committee isn't elected properly, if the slate isn't posted at least 28 days before the annual election meeting, your election is in jeopardy. So you don't want to have that happen.
It says, has the email gone out to register for the election workshop? The answer is no. It will be coming sometime probably in December. We find that if we put it out too early, people register and forget. So we'll get that a little bit closer. I can send a save the date though. I can do that. When can we reach out to possible nominees?
You can reach out to possible nominees as soon as your nominating committee has been elected and has had their first meeting and elected their chair and started their deliberations. They shouldn't be doing it outside of the meeting. So if you've been elected as a member of the nominating committee, don't start doing that, reaching out to possible candidates until you have a meeting with your group. And once you have a meeting and your group decides on who as a group, as a committee, they want to contact, then the chair would start that process and start contacting those folks.
Annie, I'm going to skip your question, but come back to it. I'm going to get the easy answers first, and then we'll come back to your question. How long can one hold a position?
It's 2 years maximum, or 2 terms for a unit. In a council, you are allowed to have a term of 2 years, but the maximum in that case is 1 year. So the maximum is 2 years, 2 consecutive years.
If you don't have alternates elected, do you not have a nominating committee?
Right, yes, you do not have a nominating committee in that case. You have to follow your bylaws, and if your bylaws state you have 5 committee members and 1 alternate, you have to have that makeup. And if you do not have a nominating committee, then the election is handled with only nominations from the floor.
If there's no chair for the nom-com, does the parliamentarian stand as the chair of the committee?
No, the committee has to have a chair. Every committee to function has to have a chair, and the nominating committee will elect their own chair. If the parliamentarian is an elected member of the nominating committee, then they can be elected as the chair, but they can't just stand as the chair as being the parliamentarian.
Can you discuss who might be on the nominating committee before the general association meeting where you elect the nominating committee?
Of course, you can discuss that amongst other members, but it's not a discussion to be held at a meeting. That you can do that in private and discuss amongst yourselves who you think might be, good members to be able to find a good slate of candidates for your PTA, but it's not a discussion to be held at a meeting.
So I'm going to go back to Hanny's question, and I think Carla, this might address your question as well. Do you mind going through the timeline again on when all this needs to happen?
Okay, let me go back to that slide. Okay. The nominating committee is elected at least 2 months before the election. Now you need to look at your units association meetings because not all of our units have meetings every month. So if you don't have if you only have a meeting, for example, in September, November, January, March kind of a thing, you have to, and your election meeting is in March, you have to elect the nominating committee at least 2 months prior, at least 60 days prior, and that would be November in that case. Then the nominating committee would meet, and they need to post the slate at least 20 days before, 28 days before the election. So in my example, where you have a meeting in November, then January, you would have to post the slate in January at that association meeting, and then post it, send it out to your members, and post it on the school site somewhere. Then the election meeting in my example would be in March, and we would follow the proper procedures then. Something else to keep in mind, that your election cannot be no later than the second week of March. The state parliamentarian is not approving any new bylaws that are being submitted where election meetings happen after in the second week of April. We're having to change those things. So that's just something else to throw out there. But it's important to start at least 60 days. It can be more than 60 days to elect the nominating committee. It's also important to post the slate at least 28 days, but it could be more than 28 days, but not less.
So just to clarify, Vera's talking about your association meetings that may not be every month. Your executive board meetings should be every month. And
Right.
that the elections have to happen before the second week of April. So
Right.
just going over that again, please make sure if you have outdated bylaws, your election dates may be later than that. So if they're outdated, if your election date is past the second week of April, your bylaws are way outdated and need to be updated. So please look into that quickly.
Yeah, look into that quickly, but if you can't get it updated and approved by your association, going through the process, updating bylaws takes about 3 months. If you can't get it done before your nominating committee's election, you have to follow your outdated bylaws because those are your current bylaws.
So yes, Hanny, it's April, the second week of April.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, if our bylaws indicate April and our meeting is scheduled for like the third week of April,
Yeah.
then do we follow and elect early in March, or do we do it in April? We're in the process of revising our bylaws, but it was held up by our mentor, and now we don't have another meeting until January. So we might be like right either final, voting on them right before or right after elections now. So I just want to know what we should do if in the case we don't have them approved by the time of March comes around.
Yeah, if they're not approved, then you follow the third week of April. You follow what your current bylaws state.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Well, hooray. Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to want to thank Vera for all her information and sharing that with us. And again, we will be having another workshop on elections closer to that time. I will send out a save the date to your president and parliamentarians. And then I'll send out the registration for the workshop a little bit closer to that. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the elections workshop.
Thank you. And this will be posted to our YouTube channel, hopefully sooner than later.